joining me in this video. Today we're going to talk about making some brick stitch wine charms, and these are actually glass charms for your glass, for your wine glass. And no judgment, you can use a beautiful stem glass to put any kind of drink you want in it. So let this just be a little necklace for your drink, whatever your drink of choice is. You can check out below in the description down below, right before the comments, and we'll have a list of all the materials that you need, so you can go ahead, gather those, and then get started. For our brick stitch wine charms, we're going to need our wine charms, of course, and these are the charms that we're going to use here. These are really just the charm holders that will build the brick stitch off of, and then if you want to add any sort of embellishment from that, you can. So we're going to use these, and the way that they work is you have here at the top this little hook, and you're simply going to hook and unhook from the little piece of wire at the top that sticks up. So it's super easy to use to take on and off, and it gives a great form to work with. So we're going to need some of those. You're probably going to want them in pairs so that if you invite friends over, you have something for the couples that are invited over. Now we also are going to need our 11O seed beads. So I've got here 4 different colors of my 11O seed beads, and you can use 1 color, 2 color, 3 colors, as many as you want, but I'm going to show you what kind of design I do with the 4 colors here. We're going to begin by working with just one of our wine charms here, and this is really just the form for the charm that we're going to build, but we're going to start here by adding to the outside with some 8O seed beads. And you can see here up at the top, this is how we open it, and this is where we're going to start. We're going to start close to that section here, this little hook here where we open and close it. I'm going to take my thread and I'm going to just tie a simple little knot over or around the form. So I don't want to get this knot caught up into the latch or the hook. I just want to tie around the round part of the form there and just give it a tuck here. So now I've got my thread anchored here on my form. I'm going to pick up 2 seed beads, and I'm going to pick them up in both the same color, and to let those 2 seed beads just fall down next to your ring. We're going to take our needle and we're going to go under the ring. We're going to come out in front of those seed beads, go under the ring, and I like to keep my finger tight against the back of my form here, so that as I pull, I'm pulling my thread as tight as I can towards me, but it's preventing those beads from also going under this form here, because you want your beads to stay where they are. You're just pulling as much thread under that form as you can. So you can see I'm just holding it so that my finger here behind is holding my beads in place. I'm going to want my beads to sit so that the holes in the beads are actually sitting perpendicular to my form. So what that means is I want the holes, when I look down on my form, I want to be able to see those holes. Taking my needle, I'm going to go through that first bead, which is the second bead here that I actually picked up, that I added. And I'm going to go sort of from like underneath out through the top. And what that's going to do is align the bead just the way that I want it, so that I'm going through the bead under my form, and then I'm going back through the bead in that same direction. So if I were to not have the form there, I would just be pulling my thread right out of my bead, but because I have my form there, that's stopping the bead from the thread from just passing right through my bead again. And then that will position my bead here to be sitting upright with the hole that you can see facing me. I'm going to then take my needle and go down from the outside towards the inside here of my form and pull that thread. And as you pull that thread, you'll see that the thread is going to just kind of form this bridge between the holes of each bead that you have here. And so that is actually called a bridge thread. Coming out of the bottom of this 8/0 seed bead, I'm going to go back up through that seed bead just like we did on this previous bead. And again, just making sure that you're capturing the wire here, this ring or this form. You want to capture this in your thread. So you're going to go around that and go back up through your seed bead so that you're going down through the seed bead, under your wire or your ring, and then back up through your seed bead. So this here is how we are going to start. So get those 2 first seed beads on, and then we will continue making our brick stitch the rest of the way around our form. Now that we have our first 2 beads on, we're ready to continue around and add the rest of our 8/0 seed beads around the form to create that base. And from that base, we can then really create whatever we want to off of that base. So coming out of this first seed bead here, this is the very first one that we added, and it's also going to be your closest one to where your form here is going to open and close. And so we don't want to add to that side. We want to actually add starting with the bead next to it. So we're going to go back down through the second 8/0 seed bead. And if you've been paying attention, you know exactly what happens next here. We're going to go under our frame and go back up through that seed bead. And then what that does is just put us in position here to then continue adding brick stitch all the way around, working away from our end point here where our latch is. These beads will move around quite a bit on you, so that's normal. And you're just going to hold them in place. They will move around, so if they move, don't worry about it. You can see here, I can kind of just push them back and forth where I need them to be. So to continue on here and continue adding the brick stitch, we're going to follow the same steps, but we're just going to keep continually moving forward. So I'm going to pick up another one of my 8/0s and go under my form. Again, I like having my finger here. My finger will allow that thread to go under it, but it won't allow my bead to go under it. So once I've got most of my thread under the form, I'm going to go up through that seed bead here, through the same hole. Well, there's only one hole. Through the same side of that hole. And that will, once I go through, I'll be coming out through the top of that bead, and I'll be in position to then add another 11/0. Another 8/0. So let me do this one more time here. I'm picking up a seed bead, and I'm just going to let that fall down to my project. I'm going under my wire and keeping my finger nice and tight against that wire so that I can pull the thread but not that bead through. Go up through that bead, that 8/0, and give it a nice tight pull there. And it should then allow that seed bead to sit directly next to the one that I added previously, and it is aligned perfectly with the hole coming facing upwards, facing outwards, away from your form here. So continue around the whole base until you get most of the way around until you get close to the other side here. You don't want to get too close to the mechanism up here, to this hook here where you're going to need to take your, where you're going to need to open and close your ring here. So you just take a look here and see how much room you need on either side of this hook to open and close it. And then you're just going to stop right about there, right about where you need to stop to give plenty of clearance to the mechanism that you have here. So I'm going to continue on here and I'll show you what mine looks like once I've got all of my 8-0 seed beads around my charm. Now that you have a nice amount of seed beads here that goes almost all of the way around your form, we're ready to begin embellishing and building off of the base here that we made with Brick Stitch. I have 19 seed beads. I wish I had 18. That would have just made me a little bit happier to have an even amount, but I wasn't going to take one off. So I have 19 of the 8-0 seed beads. You can, if you want to, once you understand how to make these, if you want to make sure that you have an even count or an odd count and design a pattern around that, you'll just be sure to have whatever count you need. But if you're just going to do something sort of free form like I am, then you just need a nice amount that's going to give you plenty of clearance on either side of that hook here. So here I am with my thread coming out of my last seed bead that I added. And I do love reinforcing things and just making sure that anything I do has a good foundation to it. So I'm going to repeat the steps that I did at the beginning here with my first 2 beads, and coming out of my last bead, I'm going to move over to the bead next to it. Just go down that bead and go up again through that bead, capturing that form with my wire or with my thread. I'm going to go to the bead at the end here and go down around my form and then up through that bead again. And I just enjoy knowing that the beginning and the end of my piece has a nice secure start and finish. Just gives me that little extra peace of mind. So those of you who are OCD or just like to have everything just so, I can completely understand that, and that's why I like to reinforce things. And if I do something on the end here, I like to do it on the end on this side as well. So one of the most basic ways that we can start to embellish and work with the other colors of beads is simply by making little fringes that come off of here. So I'm going to actually start working with a different color, and I'm going to start working with this gold color here on the end. I think that will be pretty. So just coming out of that bead, I'm coming out of my 8-0, that's part of my brick stitch. And I'm going to start by picking up 2 8-0 seed beads in a different color. Let those fall down. I'll pick up one more 8-0, and I'm just going to let this one stay on my needle and pass down through the 2 that I just added, through my brick stitch bead. And if I'm passing through my brick stitch bead, that means I always do the same thing. I go under my form and I go back up through my bead. So you can see here all I did was add a little arm of seed beads, or a little fringe if we want to call it a fringe. And now I can move on to the next bead and I can do the same thing. I also have the opportunity to add to the bridge thread as well. But I'm going to start off here by just showing you how to do this little fringe. I'm going to go to the next bead here in my brick stitch. And again, I'm always doing the same thing here, going through the bead, around the base, around that loop, that form, that frame, whatever you want to call it, and then back up through the bead. So I'm not going to repeat that every time because it's always the same steps. And here I'm going to pick up 3 of my alternating color of seed bead because I picked up 2 here, so I'm going to pick up 3 and make it a little bit longer and let those fall down. And then I pick up 1 more of that color seed bead. It doesn't even have to come off my needle. And then go through my 3 alternate color seed beads, my seed bead in the brick stitch, and you know what to do here. Now if you want to cheat a little bit, and it's not really cheating, you can just, once you're coming out of the seed bead in your brick stitch and your thread is coming out facing the center of your loop here, you can just kind of sneak over and go up through the next bead in your brick stitch. And it's not really cheating, but it just creates a different thread path. So that is also a completely valid way to do it. Just depends on how much you want to keep retracing your thread path, or if you don't mind creating a new one. So that's another way of just simply getting from one seed bead to the other in your brick stitch. So I've got here, I started out picking up 2, picking up 3, so I'm going to go to 4 here. And you can see what I'm doing here. I'm just gradually making these little branches or fringe longer, picking up that 5th bead and going back down. So I'm going to continue here, and this is just a very basic way that we can embellish this. I'm going to continue around here, and I'm going to continue making these little rays or fingers, fringes. I'm going to continue making them longer, and then once I get about halfway through, I'll start making them shorter to meet up at the other end here and have it be about the same length on this side. So I'll show you what that looks like in a little bit once I get a little bit more work done on this wine charm. So you can see here that I've made some progress in my brick stitch, and my little fingers or rays, they look like little rays of the golden sun here coming off of this with the gold seed beads. So you can see I've made quite a lot of progress. I originally was thinking that I would continue to make these longer and have them sort of cascade out, but then I realized once I got to the 7th, or the ray here where it's 7 beads long, I realized that's long enough. So what I decided was just to keep the center section here just all 7, a length of 7 seed beads. And I made note that to get up to that 7 seed bead length, it took me 5 fringes. So I started out with 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and my 7th one here was where I started with the 7th. So I needed 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 beads, 5 of my brick stitch beads here that I needed to set aside on this side. So I worked until I came to, I worked with the fringe of 7 until I got to my last 5 brick stitch beads that were open, and then I started decreasing. So that's just a simple little way that you can add some shape to the fringe and to that pretty design there. I have just one more little ray to add here, and so this one is going to be just 2 of my 8 seed beads, and again that 1 seed bead at the end, which I'm just going to leave on my needle, and I'm going to go down through all of my seed beads. And now at this point, because you're probably right at the beginning here where you have that thread that you where you originally tied on your thread, this is the original tail thread, you should be ending right where you began. And you can just tie these tail threads together. Do a knot, do a double knot, do a square knot, which is just knotting in both directions here. And then you can burn that down. So that is one way to make a really simple but elegant and really fun brick stitch earring, or sorry, brick stitch. It's an earring for your wine glass. So it's a brick stitch ring wine charm. I'm going to go ahead and just burn that down, and then I will be ready for a nice fancy drink of probably orange juice later. Another way that you can make your brick stitch wine charms is to do something that is a bit random. And with the colors that I have here, it's going to look a little pebbly, like pebbles, sands on the beach, very chic, I think, in these particular colors. So what I've done here is I've started out with the brick stitch base, just like I did here, so exactly the same base, but building off of that brick stitch base, we're going to continue with more layers of brick stitch. So again, we're starting just like we did with the previous wine charm. But now, instead of adding fringe, what I'm going to do is continue that brick stitch. So to continue here, I'm going to pick up 2 of my 8-ohs, and I'm just picking them up in a random order. I'm not even really concerned about a pattern. I'm going to skip the first bridge thread, and I'm going to pass through or pass under the next bridge thread. So the bridge thread in this case is acting just like our frame was acting when we did our first layer of brick stitch. Oops, and I dropped my needle. So I have my 2 beads on my needle here, skipping over, just skipping that first bridge thread and sliding my needle under the second bridge thread and pull that thread. And so now I've got 2 beads here added. I'm going to go through that second bead and pull that nice and tight. And I'm going to repeat again like I did on the last charm. I'm going to backtrack a little bit. I'm going to go through that first bead in this second row of brick stitch, and I'm even going to continue down through that first bead in the first row of brick stitch. I'm going to go down through 2 beads under my wire form here, and then back up through both of those beads, both of the 8-ohs. Go through the next bead in my brick stitch, under my bridge thread, and up and out through the top of that next bead. So what that does is just give me a nice, strong, tight beginning to the rest of my brick stitch work here. I'm going to pick up another bead, and I'm going to go through the next bridge thread. Now, you're going to go through either the next bridge thread, or you can double up and add to the bridge thread that you just used. You'll find that you will sometimes have to just use the same brick stitch or the same bridge thread, because you want to get your beads nice and close. And so if you just use each brick stitch one, or each bridge thread, what that's going to do is space your beads out too much. So I like to share bridge threads as necessary to just keep my beads nice and tight and close together. Again, picking up another 8-oh, go under the next bridge thread and up through that 8-oh, nice and tight. And you can see I'm now starting to form this second layer of my bridge, or of my brick stitch. So I'm going to continue here, and I'm going to continue around until I've added an entire second layer of my brick stitch. And if I'm happy with that, then I can tie off my thread. You can also continue and go for a third, a fourth, a fifth. You can do as many layers of brick stitch as you want, but just one word of caution: the longer or the thicker your brick stitch gets, a little flimsier it may be. So I'd recommend doing 2, 3, maybe 4, and see how you like it, just like that. You can see here that I've continued building on my brick stitch, and I've actually built it out to 3 layers, which gives me plenty of surface area here to have a nice mixture of these 8OC beads, even though I only have 4 different colors. Adding them in a random fashion, and then doing that 2 or 3 layers here gives us plenty of surface area to see them all kind of jumbled up. So I love this very organic, pebbly stone look. So here we are at the end. All I have to do now is just take my thread, I'll pass through a few of my beads here and tie it and burn it off as I usually would. So once I have that done, once I tie off and burn off my thread, I am all ready to attach this to a wonderful, wonderful little stem glass that carries my favorite beverage. I hope you enjoyed making these charms with me. I certainly do enjoy making them and all the different varieties that I can think up. Go ahead and comment below, let us know what you're imagining for your charms and if you enjoyed the tutorial. If you did enjoy this tutorial, you may like some of our other tutorials. If you're not already subscribed, subscribe to the channel. That way you'll get notifications. Just turn that notification bell on, and anytime we have a new video, which just may be one that you like just as much or more than this one, and we will notify you so that you don't miss anything.